Hi, Jeremy. It's
Hello.
Danielle. And I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to participate in my interview. This interview, as you already know, is about people living with disabilities. And this specific interview is about somebody living with a cognitive disability and any other disabilities, but more so a cognitive disability. I have about 8 questions that I'd like to get through. If we don't get through them, and the time allotted, it's okay. Um, just be as thorough and open as honest as you can be. This is pretty much between you and I. I am going to be writing about it, but I'm not necessarily sharing it with anybody else. So if you want to tell me a little bit about yourself in respects to your disability, your life in general, things like that, and then we can start with the questions.
Sure. Um, well, first of all, thank you for putting this together. I think it's really great that you're doing this. Um, Kind of research and things of this nature are really important. And thank you also for focusing in on cognitive disabilities, because a lot of times, as far as the world is concerned, it's a little bit in the shadows. So really appreciate that. I would say for myself personally, my cognitive disability was never really officially diagnosed till later in my life, but always as a young child, I was labeled as hyperactive and just like a whole what would be considered now as manic. Um, had dyslexia as a child as well, and that was something that was a challenge, and that continued on. My first psychotic break actually happened when I was 18 years old. Um, there was a lot of stress. I had a sort of a summer job type of situation, and there was a lot of challenging things I was going through. And I remember I was hanging out with a friend of mine after work and just going through a bunch of stuff. And um, it was it was just a really weird behavior, and I think that that's part of what it was all about. I had all my clothes on, um, and I had just, by intuition said to my friend, I was like, we were out on this dock out on Lake Erie, which is a very large lake outside of Cleveland, or on the coast of Cleveland. Cleveland's on the coast of Lake Erie, and I just jumped in the water. It was crazy, like with all my clothes on. My friend got totally freaked out. Um, I started like jumping. I had jumped. The water probably was at my chest level, so I was able to like jump and land on my feet. But it was still pretty dangerous and uh, very um, behavior that later come to realize was part of my manic behavior, and was not. I wasn't medicated. I wasn't diagnosed. I was way out there. Um,
I just wanted to stop you for 1 second, just to be mindful of the time and get into our first question, which sort of is a segue to what you've been already talking about. So if
sure.
we could just focus in on this first question, it is, can you share your disability, how your disability impacts your daily life, both positively and negatively now?
Sure. So as far as now is concerned, um, I would say that my disability, it affects my life negatively in um, just the ways that I'm able to get through my day to day life. Uh, there's times when, uh, so I suffer from bipolar mania. Um, my depressive functions are not necessarily clinical, but my mania is. I'm diagnosed as hypomanic, which is a sort of a more subtle form of mania, but it still affects my day to day life. Um, I'm able to be employed. I'm able to live a full life, but there are ways in which um, things can be difficult as well. Uh, yeah, so like emotionality on the job is at times an issue if I'm in a manic phase or kind of opened up a little bit psychologically. When I say open up, I mean like just kind of literally like the synapses in my brain are opened up a little bit more than they would be when I'm completely balanced and healthy. Positively, specifically like where I work and things similarly, my personality is very colorful. I get a lot of feedback and a lot of love back from people just from my personality and how I interact with people. I'm labeled a very high energy guy, which is good at my work. I work in sales, car sales specifically, and that's something that a lot of people really appreciate as well.
That's great. I can definitely relate to what you're talking about and the challenges of having a cognitive disability. And I'm grateful that you're able to see the positive impacts of your disability because some people without a disability are not very outgoing and they probably admire that about you because it's not that easy for some people. So
Right.
the next question is, how has society's perception of your disability influenced your experiences over time?
Um, yes, that's a very, very good question. Um, Society's perception of my disability, I would say when I was first diagnosed back in 1998, I was very sensitive to the word crazy. You're so crazy. Oh my God, you're crazy. And I was like, I'm not crazy. Or I am crazy. Stop. I know I'm crazy. Like I'm legally or whatever it is, And so I was very sensitive to that early on. I don't have that same sensitivity today, but I did have it years ago when I was first diagnosed.
Right.
Um, Today, I would say I'm very aware of my behavior. And if I start to, I'll read people. And if my behavior has got people feeling a little unsure or um, I can see that they're kind of reeling back a little bit or they can't quite handle what I'm dishing out. I just pull back. I'll just draw back and you know, kind of like brush it off or I'm just kidding or I'm just playing around or I laugh it off or and then after that I'm pulled back a little bit and just kind of trying to match them more. So it's just more where I am today is really reading the room, if you will.
Right. I
And
want to dig a little bit deeper into this question though. I'm curious to know about how like society's perception of your disability influenced your experiences over time. So for example, we have the same diagnosis, right? And I have lost friendships due to my mental illness. I've had challenges with family members when people don't really understand mental illness very well. For example, when my behavior is like erratic or I say things out of agitation that I probably wouldn't say if I wasn't so agitated. And people are like, I don't forgive you. Absolutely not. You said what you said and you hurt me, and that's that. And I'm like, but I have this situation, and they don't care. So, do you have any situations that you can recall where society's perception of mental illness specifically has influenced your experiences?
I mean, just in response to your point, I don't know if it's so much society's uh, perception more as it is an individual's reaction. Because I'm that's what I'm hearing you say is that I've lost friends. yes, I've lost friends. I've lost friends not so much because of society's perception, but more so because,
Okay,
like you
let me
said,
clarify. I see where you're going, and I hear you, and I hear you. So I guess what I'm trying to say, and I left this out, is that um so society's perception of what a disability is, for example, is generally somebody's in a wheelchair, generally somebody's blind, generally somebody can't, they can't hear. And so those are considered disabilities. But when you have a cognitive disability, like you mentioned dyslexia, which is very similar, it's a learning disability, and if you're reading slow, for example, somebody might get really impatient with you, and then you might say, "Well, I have dyslexia." And then they might just come back with whatever. You have a master's degree, for example. Like they don't believe you in some ways. If they saw somebody who's a quadriplegic running in the Olympics and they said, "I'm a quadriplegic," they'd be like, "You're lying." Do you see what I'm saying? Like the
mm,
perception of your disability.
um, yeah. So again, to me, nobody knows my disability. I'm not a quadriplegic. I'm not in a wheelchair.
It's
So nobody
invisible.
can, yeah, nobody can see it. So
Hmm.
there's no, there's no perception. All they see is a guy who's gregarious out there and a little bit.
Well, no, but by perception, I believe what the question means is like society's perception of mental illness, not what I guess I'm kind of
Yes,
confusing
but
you.
what I'm saying is that
What is
society's
what is society's perception of mental illness, and how has that perception of mental illness affected your personal
my understanding of society's perception of mental illness is people who can't hold down a job, people who are
perfect
out on the
example?
street. What?
That's a perfect example. So do you feel like if you were to disclose in a job interview that you had a cognitive disability, do you think that would affect their hiring, whether or not they would hire you?
I think it would affect how they perceive me for sure.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question. Can you describe any accessibility barriers you've faced and how you've overcome them? Do you understand what accessibility barriers mean exactly
Sure.
as it pertains to your particular diagnosis? Because I relate to you once
Okay,
again.
here's one. Here's one. So, at a previous job that I had, and we're going back to work environments, but um, there was the accessibility barrier was more so because it was behavior oriented. For example, I remember I was working on a book with somebody, and they talked about how in the job interview process they had the Cleveland Airport test, and they said they when they're interviewing somebody for a job at their company, they want to know if we're stuck in the Cleveland Airport for 4 hours, can I hang out with this person? Um, and I remember because of my uh,
Mania?
mania or cognitive disability, if you want to call it
Right.
that, that it didn't it rubbed one of my bosses the wrong way.
Right.
Uh, and so I could tell that I was out, I was on the outskirts a little bit
Now
because,
let's talk about accessibility though. So let me give you an example. And the reason why I'm adding to this question is because once again, as I've already shared with you, I have the same disability as you, and I've done a little bit of research recently because I was like, what are the accessibility options for people with our disability, right? So one of them would be a quiet room. Apparently there's supposed to be quiet rooms. I've never seen quiet rooms except for when I was in an emergency room once. And so if you are having an episode somewhere and you're out in public and you don't have a place to retreat, do you see that as a barrier to your daily life and doing what you need to get done?
no,
No, okay.
only because uh, it's hard to describe, but if I'm walking down the street and there doesn't happen to be a quiet room around the corner for me to retreat to, that's not, I don't feel like that's society's job. I feel like it's my job to
Mm,
take myself out of a,
bingo.
yeah, of a situation and go home to my quiet room.
Not
And
society.
yeah,
It's not
it's
society's job per se, but but because of the American Disability Act and what our society has agreed upon collectively, maybe not everybody, but it's been voted and created, is that we want to accommodate those with disabilities. So a lot of people with disabilities, it's very typical that they don't want pity, they don't want special treatment. And so because we have an invisible disability and it's not so
no,
much
I
the
mean, I gotta disagree. I think that the society accommodates me by providing support with, a support network. Um, Mental health days is something that is very
yes,
real
right?
in our society and can
Hmm.
be taken whenever you want.
Okay,
Um,
I agree, but can we focus on barriers? If you haven't experienced any, then we can just move on to the next question.
I mean, I think in this context, from my personal experience, I haven't experienced any barriers that would pertain.
Okay, that's fair. And okay, so I'm just this isn't really about my paper. This is more about just me sharing this with you. Um, so let's say you are having a manic episode and your doctor prescribes you to take several doses of Zyprexa throughout the next couple of days to bring down your mania, and you need to go to the market and you're driving and you get pulled over and the officer can tell that you're under the influence of something. Would you see that as a barrier?
Uh, No, not that far. If the officer arrests me for taking drugs and, all those other kinds of things. But honestly, I'll be honest, I don't think that I should be driving if I'm taking
You
Zyprexa like
shouldn't.
that.
But you shouldn't. You're right. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
But a lot of people cannot afford caregivers to go and get them food and to take care of them. A lot of times people have to do things for themselves, including myself, that we probably shouldn't be doing. So those are considered barriers that have to be taken into consideration when people like me and the other professionals in this field are looking at the ADA and how we can improve it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure, if you want to improve the ADA, then provide
No,
free.
let's move on to the next question. That's not where we're going. Okay, so the next question is, are there specific accommodations or tools that make navigating daily life easier for you?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are there specific accommodations or tools that make navigating daily life easier for you?
And are you talking about society or are you talking about the specific people in my world who help?
Okay, so the term accommodation can mean a lot of things. And I think that since generally speaking, this would apply to somebody like, let's just use an example of somebody who is in a wheelchair. So specific accommodations would be like they have a wheelchair, they have ramps, they have those doors that open for them, they have lifts to get into their cars, right? So are there any specific accommodations or tools that make navigating daily life easier for you? And I could be mistaken, but I feel like the word tool could mean medication, or tool could mean prayer. Tool could mean meditation, therapy, things like that. Because our disability is a little bit different than somebody who literally has an accommodation because they have a physical or sight or hearing disability.
Sure.
So is there any
Yeah, no,
tools that
I would say the tools would be medication for by, consultation with a professional like a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner, a psychologist. I'd say the biggest tool for me personally has to do with what I was told when I was first diagnosed, which is the support network. And
Mhm.
that is the community of people around you that you go to specifically when you feel like the wheels are falling off. Um, those tools of people who love and, know and care. My wife, perfect example. She's the closest person to me. She can actually physically feel when I'm getting manic, and she gives me direct feedback. I have a close uh, group of friends who give me very direct and real feedback on how I'm doing, and check in on me. Um, I don't have those experiences at work, but I can, like I said before, I can tell. Because I don't. There's one person at work that I'm able to confide in because we both, suffer from the same thing. But like you said, it can be difficult because there's biases and issues
Now,
that's
do
got to be
these
checked
tools
about.
that you're sharing with me, are like, for example, your wife or your close friends or your medication, do they make your daily life easier? And if so, how is it that they make your daily life easier?
Well, I would say if we start with medication, medication is number one. I have no, like, it just calms things down, evens things out, right? And I can't even clearly state. I mean, I remember when I used to take Zyprexa. I actually don't really take it anymore. But when I used to take it, I could actually, when I took it, physically felt my brain slowing down. Uh, I felt my synapses closing. I felt the energy shooting back and forth, diminishing. So there was an actual physical feeling that I had with that particular medication. The fact that I take another same type of medication, Abilify, and it doesn't have the sedative effects of Zyprexa, I don't feel it so much because I take it every day. And so it's just always doing the work and just kind of keeping that next level, that I would break through oftentimes when I was just on my behavior modification, Depakote.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that you're on a new medication that's working for you, especially one that it just does the job and you're not like really aware that even anything's going on. All you have to do is just put a pill in your mouth. That makes things great. And so what about the people in your life?
Yeah. So again, the people, and again, I get the feedback from people at work. I would say I'm really happy right now because usually with these types of medications, it's going to have some kind of psychotropic effect on me that's going to kind of affect my mood in a way that slows me down. But I don't get that kind of feedback from work anymore. Or if I'm flying up a little bit and I'm a little bit manic, people at work love that, but my wife can't stand it. And so I have to be, really cognizant of her needs, because we live together and we're sharing a life together, and she's very affected. It's something that I found very interesting, that that it's visceral with her. She can feel me in a way that is very toxic and very harmful to her. So I can't have that. I can't be that way.
Hmm,
Um,
that's
yeah.
very sweet. Well, I think you kind of already went in depth. I apologize for asking again because you did really begin with describing the people in your life. So I have another few questions for you. I just want to note the time. It's 8:36. I believe this is going to end at 8:45. And the next question, you might wonder, like, I don't know how to answer this. I'm assuming, I'm just assuming you may. But in the event that you don't have a specific answer or it doesn't affect you, or you don't know, it's very much okay to answer the question like that. So the question is, how has the ADA impacted your life, whether positively, negatively, or both?
Um, well, I think just having awareness and opening up. See, look, it's like this. It's like if you open up the door to people with disabilities, and then you incorporate someone like myself into that family, then I am now a part of that. So it's sort of like the machete has already been cut through, you know, way back when, and it's really, forged by certain disabilities, certain people with disabilities, and even though a cognitive disability may be a different type, we are what they say walking on the shoulders of our ancestors, walking on the shoulders of those who came before. And so I feel like there's a certain uh, mentality or a certain establishment. You know, there's laws and there's ways in which things like mental health has to be honored in this society. And it's something that you can't walk away from the way you could back in say the 80s or something like that. There's it's paid attention to. You must pay attention. You must honor, you must support, you must give the people what they need if they're going through anything mentally in which they need support. And so there's a lot more of it in the society nowadays. And for that, I think the ADA had a great deal to do with that.
Right. I definitely agree with you. And in fact, I never even knew that they acknowledged mental illness. I'm learning so much from this class that I'm taking because I didn't even know that before I was taking this class. And in all honesty, I didn't even connect the dots about mental health days because the last time I worked, I don't believe they offered mental health days. So
Yeah.
things change over time. And, in a lot of ways, people are not in the know. And so that's why I want to be a counselor so I can keep whomever I'm working with in the know, connected, asserting their rights, all of these different things. And so it's very important to me to learn the law and to share it with others and let them know that they have rights because people with disabilities oftentimes they don't want to once again experience any pity and they also don't want to be a burden and so it's just a challenging situation. So I'm really grateful to hear your perspective. It's very fascinating because it's so much more different than the other three people I've interviewed and I had a feeling after I processed everything that was going to be the case. So we're going to wrap up with our last question. You have a little less than 5 minutes. And the question is, do you think public awareness of disability and accessibility is improving? What more could be done?
I definitely think it's improving. Well, God, now in today's climate, we could be going backwards for a while. Um, uh, but I don't know about that. It just hasn't been touched on yet. Um, let's see, what could be used, what could be improved. Um, as far and you're speaking specifically about cognitive, of course, cognitive. We're talking about cognitive disability.
You're more than welcome to share your ideas about disability and accessibility in general because you are a member of society and you see what people are dealing with on a regular basis and there's people who have opinions on things even though they're able-bodied.
Sure. Um, I would say just like I'm trying to actually keep it focused on cognitive, but I'm touching on others. Um, all right, here's an example. Uh, so a lot of times we have a few handicapped people who work at my job, and there's people who just park in their spots. It's like how rude, and they just do it because they're running late for a meeting. Um, and I just feel like that should be you should get towed. Like the what's the word? There should be no tolerance for that kind of behavior. Um, they use the handicap bathroom, the toilet, and those kinds of things. Like I know that people feel bad about it sometimes because one of the people that we have who is handicapped comes in, and then he would have to use the smaller bathroom. And but still, it's just a thing that's just not on the consciousness. People are selfish. They're not thinking about how the accommodations that have been set up are are meant for those people that they're set up for.
Yeah, I hear you. And I've been to your job and I come there late at night and I never park in the handicap spots, even though it's tempting. But I am on the same page as you, and that's why you're my husband and I love you. So I wanted to say,
Wait, what?
I wanted to say, I wanted to say, do you think like a marketing campaign, one that of awareness throughout, the cities and etc., or maybe even a PSA on the radio, wherever people are, being reached today, could it improve upon what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Any any uh any campaigns, any marketing campaigns, um, strewn out throughout all media and stuff like that would be very helpful too.
Yeah, because I don't want you out there getting in fistfights in the parking lot with people, even though you're my hero and I'd be so proud. But I think there's a right way to go about this, right? To getting the awareness out there about how to improve things and how you I'm really interested in pushing this campaign onto somebody. How you can do your own housekeeping, meaning like check yourself, like, wait, no, handicap bathroom, don't use that one. Wait, no, handicap parking spot, no, don't park there. Like just remind yourself that those signs are there for a reason.
Right.
Well, Jeremy, I really want to thank you for your time this evening. It was
Absolutely.
a it was a great interview. You had a lot of great insight, and I am excited to write this paper now. You're my last interviewee, and I'm also excited about that.
Oh,
So
good.
you have a good night.
Thank you. You too. I'll
All
see you
right.
later.
See ya.